Today is definitely a day to stay inside and do nothing. It's been about a week since I've had my new camera, the Fujifilm GFX 50S. I've also got it paired up with the Mitakon 65mm 1.4. This video isn't going to be a review of this lens or this camera since I haven't had it for long enough to actually do a review. Maybe in a few months' time I will do one, but for now, this is just me basically just saying why I bought this camera, what it's good for, some things that I like about it, and I'll just show you some images. So to start off, I'll just tell you why I bought this camera. Last year in September, I ended up buying a Fujifilm X Pro 3 to replace my 35mm film shooting, and it pretty much done that entirely apart from my Cats on Film project, which I'm having to shoot 35mm film for since obviously it's on film, and it's just a lot easier to take photos of cats that are moving around with autofocus cameras, and I don't have an autofocus medium format camera, so yeah, that's the only reason why I'm still shooting 35mm film. But I wanted something like that for my medium format photography. Right now I use the Pentax 6.7 with the 105 2.4 lens, and I was wanting something that could sort of recreate that 6x7 look, since it is a very special look. I guess I could just say I was looking for something that would create that medium format look, but a lot of the time when people are talking about that medium format look, they're talking about image quality. I don't really care too much about image quality. I think my X Pro 3's image quality is more than enough for what I need, but I was just wanting that depth of field that medium format has. Since it's just like a whole bunch of stuff to do with like the film size or the sensor size, and then the focal length of the lens, and you know, the aperture and all that. Basically it's just a whole mess of really technical things, and I cannot be bothered explaining them. But what you just need to understand is with a larger sensor or a larger like size of film really is the focal length needs to be longer for it to be the equivalent of what it is on a 35mm like plane, if that makes sense. And the same with like crop sensor and stuff like that. So for instance, on my X Pro 3 I've got a 35mm lens here, but because it's a crop sensor camera it's the equivalent of a 50mm. But obviously on a full frame camera or like a 35mm film camera, a 50mm will be a 50mm. But since, you know, medium format, it's even bigger, than like a 65mm on this camera, this GFX, will then be a 50mm, and yeah, just it's very annoying stuff to get into, and I always go on rambles about it when anyone asks me about stuff, and I feel like such a nerd because I could just talk for hours and hours and hours about really nerdy photography stuff. But anyway, yeah, as I was saying, I wanted that medium format look, and this was the closest thing that I found to creating that medium format look. And I actually found out about this lens because of Kyle McDougall. He made a video about it, and as soon as I watched that video I realised that I needed this lens in my life. It created pretty much an identical look to the Pentax 6.7, and after going down the rabbit hole of trying to find an alternative to buying a GFX, because medium format photography, well, digital medium format photography is very expensive, I came to the conclusion that this is probably the best thing to buy, since it is a medium format camera, and like I'm not going to be able to get that medium format look with a full frame camera. You just can't do it. After coming to the conclusion that, you know, it is just the best thing to buy, I ended up buying it, and the lens arrived like a few days after the body, since I bought the body from MPB second hand, and it was actually cheaper than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be like £2,000-3,000, but it wasn't. It was a lot less than that, so that's nice. And the lens wasn't super expensive either. It still was expensive, but for a digital medium format camera lens, it was quite cheap. Now that I spent ages just telling you why I wanted to buy this camera and why I bought it and the reason that I bought it, let me just get into some things I like about it. And the first one is that shallow depth of field. Even though I'd done all the digging that I possibly could, I was actually still surprised with how shallow the depth of field on this camera and lens combo is. Like, it will be an eyelash in focus and your eyeball out of focus. Like, I'm not even kidding. That is how shallow it actually is, and that is exactly what I was looking for. The separation is also pretty good. Since it is a 65mm lens and it's on medium format, it's the equivalent of a 50mm, so you get that 65mm separation but on a 50mm like lens, which is quite nice, but I was hoping for more, but I can't really expect too much. It's a 44 by 33mm sensor, so I'm not actually going to get anything crazy from a 65mm, but you know, like maybe one day when sensors are the size of like, you know, 6x6 negatives, then I will get exactly what I'm looking for. But until that day comes, this is as close to it as I'm ever going to get. So yeah, the look that you get from it is exactly what I was hoping for, and I am as happy as I can be. Another thing that I like about this camera, which might actually surprise people, is the weight. The camera itself isn't super heavy, it's about the same weight as like a professional level DSLR, but the lens itself is very heavy. I think it's about twice as heavy as the body, but I really like it. It makes it feel like you're doing something important when you're just taking photos of whatever. And I like having heavier cameras, to be honest. I like using the Mamiya RZ67. That's a very heavy camera, and whenever you take a photo, it feels meaningful. And I think that's what this does. It makes every photo that you take feel meaningful, which sort of puts you in the direction of that film experience. Since you're shooting every photo and you're being like, okay, I've actually taken a photo, rather than just press the button like with my X Pro 3. I do love my X Pro 3, but at times it does feel like a toy camera since it weighs nothing and it's very small, but it's just more of that street photography experience rather than what I like a lot of the time, which is that editorial, slow-paced portrait experience, or even just like environmental stuff. Another thing that I like about this camera is the screen. It might actually surprise people, but I really like how it extends out on the back. I think that just makes it look a bit closer to the old 645 cameras, especially like how I had my Mamiya 645 and the viewfinder on it. It looks quite similar to that. Obviously it's not going to be the same, since 645 cameras a lot of the time do just look like rectangles with a viewfinder and a lens, but it does sort of mimic that look, and I think it's quite cool for doing that. The screen's actually also quite nice as well, that the way it rotates, it can rotate in a few different directions, and it's just quite useful having that really, since sometimes you need to check your focus and you don't want to have to just go down with your camera, like for instance if you're shooting quite low, and it's very useful for that stuff. Obviously the image quality is amazing. It's a medium format sensor, so you shouldn't really expect anything less than amazing. And it's definitely that. Like, I can zoom in so very far, like further than I need to, and it'll still be very sharp. And I don't really care much for that stuff, but it's just quite cool to be able to do that. It's a bit gimmicky really, because you're never going to need to use all like that resolution. But I just literally got this camera purely for the medium format like depth look and not the image quality look. Another thing that's quite cool is the focus throw. You can make some very, very minute adjustments with it, which is needed with a camera that can focus down to what is the equivalent of f1.1. It's not anything amazing, but it is quite nice to just, you know, have a lens that you can move quite a bit and you're still focusing like a very small amount. I quite like that, especially on a lens like this, where it's very, very shallow. Another notable thing is the battery life. I was not expecting it to be this good, but it's very good. It's not anything like mind-blowing, but it will last you like a full day of shooting and then maybe a bit the next day. Yeah, it's pretty good. That might just be because I do have a manual focus lens and it doesn't have to focus all the time, but it's still like very good even if you do have an autofocus lens on it. I have used them before with autofocus lenses and the battery life doesn't go down fast at all, other than like a whole day of shooting, and it's gone down maybe 3 bars out of the 5 that it has. So it's pretty good, and it's a lot better than, you know, the X Pro 3. Like that battery life is pretty bad. I think the final thing I'm going to talk about right now is this here. Like, I'm not even talking about things that are like that crazy to do with the camera, but it's just nice little things, and this is one of them. You can take off the viewfinder here and have a camera that doesn't have a viewfinder, and you have to use the screen. It sort of recreates that top-down waist level viewfinder look. I really like it. I haven't actually like tried shooting with it like that yet. Well, I have, but like not anything serious, and I just think it's really, really fun to be able to do that. I can imagine it's very fun shooting like that, so yeah. I'm going to do that probably for one video, just like doing a Vivian Mare style top-down shooting experience. I don't know, something like that. But yeah, it literally, if the viewfinder comes off, it just slides right back on. And there you go. Anyway, that's going to be the end of me talking. I'm just going to let you see some images here that I've taken with this camera in the past week. Hopefully you enjoy them if you have. Don't forget to check out my Instagram, and yeah, bye-bye.